We've been sending distress signals across the galaxy for months. Ambassador Litt's forearms trembled as he spoke before the Coalition Council. No one is responding. The void swarm devours another world with each cycle. Elder Glint's crystalline form pulsed with a faint light. There's a signal we haven't called upon. Those from the Death World. Litt recoiled in horror. They're more dangerous than the swarm, perhaps. Glint replied. That's exactly what we need. The message came across all frequencies and in all languages. Desperate and clear. Please help us. They're coming. We can't stop them. For 3 days, the signal was repeated on all Earth's communications networks. Scientists, military leaders and government officials gathered to discuss the unprecedented alien contact. Dr. Walker, head of xenolinguistics, shook her head. The message contains built-in translation matrices. It is designed to be understood by any civilization capable of receiving it. It is a true distress call in orbit. Over Earth, the battleship Terminus was maintaining its routine patrol. Captain James Reed watched the blue planet below, unaware that his life was about to change forever. His ship was the newest in the Earth fleet, designed for deep space operations and armed with the weapons humanity had developed after centuries of internal conflict. Captain Reed called his communications officer. Priority message from command. Reed straightened his uniform and turned to the main screen. The stern face of Admiral Wilson appeared. Have you heard about the alien signal? The Admiral asked. Yes, sir. The entire planet has heard. We have decided to respond. Terminus will be in charge of first contact. Red's heart leaped. First contact, the words humanity had waited for centuries. Why, sir, are we a warship, not a diplomatic vessel? Admiral Wilson's face hardened even further. Because the message is a plea for help against something that is killing them. If we are going to get into danger, I want our best ship. Be there. Lieutenant Adams, a tactical officer, approached Reed after finishing the transmission. A first contact mission, sir. This crew was trained for combat, not diplomacy. Reed studied the star charts that showed their destination. Perhaps that's precisely why they chose us. Whatever is out there terrified those aliens so much that they sent out a call to the entire galaxy. 3 days later, Terminus was preparing to depart. Earth's governments had banded together to make the decision to answer the call. This was humanity's opportunity to join the galactic community that might exist beyond the solar system. At the last briefing, Dr. Elisa Morgan, the ship's chief scientist, presented her analysis. The signal contains biological markers that don't match anything in our databases. What threatens these aliens? It doesn't look like us or them. It's something completely different. Readdressed his 400-person crew from the bridge. We don't know what we're up against. We don't know who sent the message. But we know they need help, and Earth has decided to provide it. This mission could be dangerous. It will undoubtedly change human history forever. As the crew took their positions, Red felt the weight of responsibility falling upon his shoulders. Humanity's first step into the galactic community would be as warriors, not explorers or diplomats. The idea was overwhelming. All systems go, Captain, reported Adams. Reed nodded. Activate the thruster. The Terminus disappeared from Earth's orbit in a flash of light that, for an instant, shone brighter than the sun, carrying humanity's deadliest weapons and toughest soldiers toward an alien call for help. None of them on Mindo of Tin Chin could imagine what awaited them, or that the peaceful coalition of spacefaring species had summoned the one thing they feared, almost as much as extinction itself. Humans, the inhabitants of the Death World, forged on a planet that tried to kill them every day of their existence. The galaxy was about to discover that this would be either their worst mistake or their only hope. To survive, they reached the coordinates embedded in the message. A massive space station orbited a world of blue and green hues. The station's design was sleek, with sweeping curves and transparent sections that revealed gardens within. It was nothing like the utilitarian human vessels. "They're sending us a greeting," the communications officer reported. The main screen came to life, showing a slender, four-armed creature with iridescent skin. Its large eyes visibly opened at the sight of the humans. "You came," the alien said, its voice translating. "Through the same matrix that had decoded your distress call, we didn't expect a response from your species. I am Captain James Reed of the Earth vessel Terminus. We received your distress call." The alien's body trembled slightly. "I am the lead ambassador of the Galactic Coalition. We sent our plea to every corner of the galaxy, but we never imagined." The alien stopped, as if gathering his courage. "We never imagined that those from the Death World would respond." "Death World?" Reed asked. "Your planet is classified as a lethal world in our records. Too dangerous to approach. Its gravity, atmosphere, pathogens, predators, and even the aggression levels of your own species are all lethal by our standards." He exchanged glances with his officers. "So why ask for our help, Ambassador?" Lit's four hands clasped together in what looked like a gesture of prayer. "Because what's coming toward us is worse than anything you can imagine. We call it the Void Swarm. Consumes everything in its path, and our weapons cannot stop it." The Coalition station's hangar was enormous, designed to accommodate ships from hundreds of different worlds. The terminus looked out of place among the sleek, colorful vessels, dark, angular, and covered in weapons. Captain Reed led a small team toward the station. Ambassador L waited alongside a group of aliens, each stranger than the last. Some floated in the air, others walked on multiple legs, and one appeared to be made of living crystal. "Welcome to Harmony Station," Lit said, keeping a noticeable distance from the humans. "Please forgive our caution. Your biology is troubling to us." Reed nodded. "We understand. We come in peace and to offer aid." The crystal being stepped forward, light dancing across its transparent body. "I am Elder Glint of the Council. Your ship is a weapon, a dreadnought," Reed replied honestly. "Built for defense and combat." A murmur ran through the alien delegation. A small, six-eyed creature fainted, falling into the arms of its companions. Lit's voice trembled. Their entire ship was designed for war. "We had heard rumors that the inhabitants of the Death World built such things, but to see it in person, they asked for help against something that is killing their people." Reed said, "What did they expect? Perhaps scientists, diplomats?" The crystalline form of Glint pulsed with light, "Not warriors." Dr. Morgan took a step forward. "I am a scientist, but I understand why they fear us. Our world forged us to survive through strength, but that same strength can now protect them." Reed looked around the beautiful station. Everything was designed for comfort and beauty. There were no defenses. There were no weapons. These people had never known war as humans understood it. "Take us to your command center," Reed said. "Show us what we're up against." The central chamber of Harmony Station contained a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of green dots represented the Coalition worlds. An expanding red mass was consuming an edge of their territory. The Void Swarm began at the edge of known space. L explained. "It's not intelligent as we understand it. It simply consumes." Reed studied the map. "How fast does it move?" "It has devoured 17 worlds in a single cycle." Glint replied. "Billions of dead, it leaves nothing behind." "And your defenses?" Lieutenant Adams asked. The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We have deterrent technology," L said carefully. "It's designed to deter aggressive species. It's not meant for war." Reed's expression hardened. "Show me recordings of the swarm." The holographic projection changed to show a planet surrounded by what looked like a living cloud. Billions of insectoid creatures, each the size of a small car. They covered the world's surface. Plants, animals, and even buildings dissolved beneath the surface. Its contact with the swarm consumes all organic matter and converts it into more of itself, L explained, his voice shaking. "Our weapons barely managed to slow it down." As Reed watched the footage, his expression darkened. The swarm was not only a threat to the coalition. If it continued to grow at this rate, sooner or later, it would also find Earth. And when it did... Hey, a quick pause in the stream before continuing this galactic journey. If you're enjoying this unique sci-fi experience, subscribe to the channel now. And most importantly, activate the bell so YouTube's algorithm will make sure you don't miss the next videos with the most mind-blowing science fiction stories you won't find anywhere else. Now, let's get back to our story. Hill signaled his team to stop. The scanner was pulsing silently in his hand, each signal marking a possible death approaching, but then the signals changed direction, moving away from their position. They weren't Iraq troops, just maintenance drones still following their programmed routes despite the chaos. On the surface, Hill exhaled. They would live for now in another part of the colony, buried between failing systems and broken signals. Hangler knew they were losing the horizon, drowned in smoke. Outside was proof enough, and he had one last task. He exhaled, forcing his hands to remain steady as he performed another scan of the system. There must be something left, a repeater muttered. A low-frequency channel, hell, even an old maintenance link. Dienzo, still slumped against the bulkhead, simply shook his head. If there was something, you would have found it by now. Hangler ignored him, moving to another panel, digging between each system buried in the network. A signal bar. Then two. He held his breath. A burst of static crossed the speakers. Something was breaking through, and then the signal collapsed. It wasn't interference, it wasn't a glitch. The stomach she twitched. Someone had cut her. Dienzo caught the expression on her face. It's bad, right? Hangler didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the broken console, the error message flashing, and reality settling in his chest like molten iron. He swallowed. We were alone in the ruins of a cargo terminal. Sela Toguchi moved quickly. Crouching, the air was thick with dust and the icy smell of burnt plastic. She knew those streets better than anyone. Every alleyway, every hidden passage between storage yards. Her boots barely made a sound as they slid over a broken fence. Hiding behind an overturned transport, a Zarek squad passed nearby. Scanning the area, they moved in close formation, disciplined. Cautious, their weapons hummed, weakly charged and ready. One of them stopped near the fence. His helmet tilted slightly, as if listening for something. Sela didn't breathe. His fingers clutched the metal bar he'd ripped from a destroyed chassis, feeling its weight. His balance wasn't much, but he wasn't looking. Winning a fight is all about surviving the next 10 seconds. The Serac hesitated for a moment, then continued. She counted 3 breaths before moving again. She had work to do. The colony's underground tunnels ran deep, connecting warehouses, factories, and distribution centers. Places not shown on official maps. Places she knew like the back of her hand. And if there were still people alive, they were going to need routes to move unseen through the city. Near the destroyed defense barracks, Johnny Kov pressed himself against a wall, holding his breath. The alleyway stank of burnt plasma and blood. He could hear Sarek voices nearby, the sharp clicks of their language cutting through the silence of the dead streets. He adjusted his grip on the pistol he had ripped from a soldier's corpse. A single clip. That was all. He calculated the angles, the numbers. 3 enemies. A direct line of sight. Suicide. But then, beyond them, movement. A man, not a kid, maybe 18. He came out, staggering from a side street, hands half raised, shaking with fear. A survivor who had been foolish enough to expose himself. One of the Zareks turned. Raising his rifle, the KOF moved. A shot cracked through the air, sharp and deafening. The first Serac fell instantly. The shot pierced his neck. In the small opening in his armor, the KOF was moving before the body hit the ground. The other 2 spun around, aiming. The KOF didn't stop. His shoulder connected with the second, deflecting the rifle. A plasma shot grazed him so close he felt the heat. He fired again at point-blank range. The third raised his rifle. A flash of movement. The kid. He had a knife. He didn't hesitate. He plunged it between the Sarek's armor plates in a wild, desperate attack that brought them both down. The KOF didn't wait to see the outcome. He ripped the rifle from the second body and ended the fight with a single shot. Silence. The kid gasped, eyes wide open. The knife still pinned to the alien's chest. His hands were shaking. COV grabbed his shoulder. "Are you still breathing?" A nod. "Okay, now you're coming with me." The boy gulped. "Where are we going?" COV pulled an extra clip from the belt of a fallen Sarek and clipped it to his weapon. They looked for more people still alive. Before he could move, a figure emerged from the shadows in front of them. Kov raised his rifle in an instant, then lowered it. Toguchi appeared, wielding a metal bar, his eyes scanning the boy. The bodies on the ground. There were no hesitations, no wasted words. COV nodded once. He returned the gesture. Whatever fight she'd been through, she'd already made her decision. Without saying anything, he stood by her side. 6 battleships formed a defensive line, while behind the minions, the research ship. Investigation began. Mass production of Dr. Morgan's pathogen. Coalition representatives watched in horror and fascination as the humans prepared for war with an efficiency that spoke of centuries of practice. Weapons were checked, combat ships were supplied, and missiles were loaded with a biological agent. The EPI. "The first wave of the swarm will reach us in 12 hours, General Harris announced during the last meeting. "Our strategy is simple. Hold the line and deploy the pathogen. If Dr. Morgan is correct, we will see results in a few days." Ambassador Lid addressed the human commanders solemnly. "The coalition has existed for 3,000 years without the need for weapons of war. Today, we witness methods that challenge our deepest beliefs, but we have no other choice. We thank you for your help, even though your ways terrify us." He nodded respectfully. Sometimes surviving requires doing terrifying things. Ambassador Lid said, 3 days later, the first engagement with Milotin began. The swarm ship's human warplanes fired their missiles at the approaching biological cloud. The pathogen dispersed exactly as Dr. Morgan had predicted for the first time in her existence. The void swarm retreated. The planet Ilias rotated slowly under a red sun, once home to over 5 million coalition citizens. It now served as the front line in humanity's war against the void swarm. Coalition ships filled the skies, ferrying civilians to safety, while the human fleet established a defensive perimeter around the evacuation zones. Lieutenant Marcus Rivera stood at the edge of the landing zone, watching as the last transports were loaded. His battle armor was scratched and dented from 3 weeks of fighting. Beside him, 50 human soldiers were preparing their weapons and equipment. How many remained to be evacuated? Rivera asked the coalition coordinator, a tall, insect-like being named Trill 6000. Trill answered with its jaws clicking nervously, but our sensors detect swarm activity. Approaching from the north, they've adapted to the pathogen faster than expected. Rivera nodded, his expression grim. Dr. Morgan's biological weapon had worked wonders at first, but the swarm was evolving. Each new generation showed more resistance. "We'll stop them," Rivera said. "Just make sure you get your people onto those ships." Trill's compound eyes reflected the setting sun. "They can't stop them with so few soldiers." Rivera checked his rifle. "We're not like you. We're used to fighting." Against the worst odds, the radio crackled. "Lieutenant, swarm units spotted at 5 miles and closing fast. Move into position." Rivera ordered his team. "Remember to aim for the nodes. They're still vulnerable." There. The human soldiers fanned out along the ridgeline overlooking the evacuation site. The planet's hostile environment. Thin air, high gravity, and scorching heat. It had claimed the lives of 2 members of Rivera's team, but the remaining soldiers had adapted, using the harsh conditions to their advantage. "Here they come," Sergeant Cooper shouted from his observation post. Thousands of them. Rivera raised her binoculars. The horizon darkened as the swarm drew closer. A writhing mass of chitinous bodies flowed like liquid over the rocky terrain. Wait until they cross the marked line, Rivera instructed. Then hit them with everything we've got. The first wave of the swarm crossed the invisible border. Rivera gave the signal, and the ridge erupted in weapons fire. Explosive munitions ripped through the alien mass. Each burst destroyed dozens of creatures, but for every one that fell, 10 more emerged behind. They're adapting to our attack pattern, Cooper shouted over the roar of gunfire. They're changing formation. Rivera watched as the swarm split into 3 groups. The frontal assault continued while the other 2 attempted to flank the human position. They've never done that before, he muttered. They're learning. For 3 hours, they held the line while the evacuation ships filled up and took off one after another. Rivera's forces suffered heavy casualties, 20 dead and 15 wounded. The last transport has departed. Trill announced over the radio, all civilians evacuated. Rivera looked at his remaining forces, bloodied, exhausted but still fighting. They retreated to the extraction point. Mission accomplished. Aboard the terminus, Captain Ridd received the report of the Ilias evacuation with mixed feelings. Another world saved, but at a very high cost. The swarm is adapting faster than we anticipated, Dr. Morgan explained during the emergency meeting. Each new generation shows more resistance. CIA to our methods. I've analyzed the most recent samples. They're evolving new protective membranes, designed specifically to resist our pathogen. General Harris's hologram flickered across the table. How long before our current weapon becomes ineffective? 2 weeks, 3 at the most? Morgan replied. I'm working on modifications, but they learn too quickly. She reviewed the strategic screen. The red mass of the swarm had slowed but hadn't stopped. We're buying time, not the war. Perhaps that's enough, the ambassador said quietly. Each day allows thousands more of our people to reach safety. The crystalline form of Elder Glint pulsed with a dim light, but at what cost? Their forces dwindle with each engagement. The coalition had never faced losses of this magnitude because they'd never truly fought. Lieutenant Adams said, exhaustion evident in her voice after weeks of continuous combat. Even the human soldiers were reaching their limits. Dr. Morgan stood suddenly. I need to approach this differently. The pathogen was just a temporary measure. We need something that attacks their entire network simultaneously. What are you proposing? Reed asked. I've been studying the swarm's energy patterns. They're attracted to thermal radiation. That's how they find habitable worlds to consume. Morgan activated a different screen, showing a massive gas giant at the edge of Coalition space. This is Hyperion, a gas giant composed primarily of hydrogen and helium, the perfect materials for a fusion. The Coalition representatives murmured in confusion, but Reed understood immediately. Do you want to turn it into a star? He said quietly. A controlled fusion reaction, Morgan confirmed. The thermal pulse would act as a decoy, drawing the entire swarm toward Hyperion. When enough of them have gathered, we detonate the planet's core, Reed added, creating a stellar-level event that would annihilate them. The energy release would be equivalent to a small supernova, Morgan said. Nothing within half a light-year would survive. The Coalition Council erupted in protests. Elder Glint's voice rose above the others. This is unthinkable. The moons of Hyperion have research outposts. 3 nearby systems would be devastated by radiation. We cannot commit such an act of destruction. Red stepped forward, his patience worn thin by weeks of battle. The swarm will reach their homeworlds in 15 days. How many more billions will die while clinging to principles their enemy does not share? General Harris nodded in agreement. All conventional options have failed. The swarm adapts to everything we throw at it. This may be our only chance to end this. Ambassador Lit stepped to the center of the room, silencing the arguments with a gesture. I have seen humans fight and die for people they have never met. Their methods disturb us, but their sacrifice is real. He turned to Elder Glint. We must consider Dr. Morgan's plan. The debate lasted 6 hours. The coalition scientists analyzed Morgan's proposal, looking for alternatives and finding none. Someone will have to activate the catalyst manually after confirming the swarm has gathered, Morgana Reed explained. The radiation will make remote detonation impossible. Reed studied the mission parameters. A suicide mission. Whoever activated the catalyst would have at most a few minutes to escape the initial blast wave. I'll lead the activation team, Morgan said simply. She looked up in surprise. Captain, the odds of survival are irrelevant, Reed interrupted. This is our only chance. I won't ask anyone else to do it. As preparations continued, the swarm seemed to sense the trap. Their advance toward the coalition homeworlds slowed as units began to move toward Hyperion. It's working, Morgan whispered, watching. The sensor readings are responding to the thermal decoy. Reed gathered his volunteer crew, 15 men and women who knew they might not return. Ambassador Led approached. As they boarded the small, speedy ship that would take them to Hyperion, their willingness to sacrifice themselves, the alien struggled for words. We have no concept for this. In our language, Ree smiled slightly. We call it courage. Ambassador, it's what we do. We inhabitants of the Death World. The largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the Coalition advanced toward swarm territory. 6 human dreadnoughts formed the core, surrounded by hundreds of Coalition transport and support vessels. The plan was simple but dangerous. Breaking through the outer defenses. Morgan's team to collect samples before retreating. I stood on the terminus bridge, watching as the first defenders of the swarm appeared on all ship sensors. Combat positions. I ordered the coalition ships to fall back to a safe distance. This is where we prove our worth. The human vessels moved in formation, activating their weapon systems with trained precision. The swarm responded by sending thousands of smaller units to surround the fleet. They had never coordinated like this before. Lieutenant Adams observed. They are evolving tactically, so we should too. Reed responded. Execute Delta pattern. Target their largest concentrations. The human ships broke formation, each taking a different attack vector. Their weapons tore through the swarm, creating temporary gaps in the living wall of creatures. The main cannon loaded. The weapons officer reported. Aim for center of mass and fire. Reed ordered the terminus to it shuddered as its main weapon fired a brilliant beam of energy. It cut through the swarm formation, vaporizing thousands of creatures instantly. The other human vessels followed suit, their combined firepower opening a path forward. For 6 hours, the battle raged through space. 2 human ships were destroyed, their crews evacuated to coalition vessels as the swarm overwhelmed their defenses. But the strategy worked. They managed to break through to the breeding world. We're in position, Reed announced to Dr. Morgan's team. They had an hour on the surface. The small stealth ship, Firebreak, approached Hyperion's turbulent surface through the viewports. Captain Reed and his 14 volunteers gazed at the immense gas giant, whose atmosphere seethed with storms larger than Earth itself. But it wasn't the planet that captured their attention. The space around Hyperion was teeming with the enemy. Billions of swarm units had gathered. Attracted by the thermal decoy designed by Dr. Morgan, the plan was working perfectly. Last approach, Lieutenant Adams announced from the pilot seat, her hands moving firmly over the controls despite knowing that this could be their last mission. We will arrive at the insertion point in 5 minutes. Red addressed her team. Once in position, we will have 30 minutes to plant the catalyst devices and retreat to a safe distance. She paused, looking each in the eye. If we succeed, the galaxy will live on. If we fail, the swarm will continue until nothing remains. No one needed to mention the slim chances of survival. Everyone had accepted the risk by volunteering. Firebreak launched into Hyperion's upper atmosphere, using the planet storms as cover. The swarm units passed close by, without detecting the small human ship inside. At a precisely calculated depth, the team deployed the primary catalyst, a device that would cause a chain reaction in the planet's hydrogen core. Primary catalyst deployed. Reported. The engineer initiating the activation sequence, Redefines, checked the timer. 25 minutes to get away. We move. While they were preparing to retreat, disaster struck. A runaway storm front struck the firebreak, damaging the main engine. The ship shook violently, alarms blaring throughout the cabin. Engine 2 out of service. Adams, he shouted. We're losing altitude. Red moved to the engineering station. We can reach escape velocity with one engine remaining. The engineer's expression said it all. Not with everyone on board, sir. Silence fell over the bridge. The mission parameters had just passed dangerous thresholds. Reed made his decision. Snap the crew down to a minimum of 5. The rest evacuate into the emergency pods. Before anyone could protest, he added, "That's an order." After a brief discussion, 9 crew members entered the escape pods. With Adams, the engineer, and 2 others, their task now was simple. Keep the ship operational long enough to ensure the catalyst activated properly. 10 minutes until ignition, the engineer reported. As the last escape pod took off above them, the swarm noticed the small ship exiting Hyperion's atmosphere. Thousands of units split off to investigate. "They're following the pods," Adams said. Watching the sensor screen, Reed opened the communication channel. Coalition command. "This is Reed. Our position is compromised. Initiate Operation Sun Forge immediately." From a safe distance, the coalition fleets and humans watched as the swarm units surrounded Hyperion, drawn to the catalyst's growing thermal signature. "Minutes to ignition," Dr. Morgan announced, her eyes fixed on the data feed from Red Ship. "The catalyst is stable." Ambassador Le and Elder Glint stood silently nearby, watching as the humans prepared to sacrifice themselves for a galaxy not their own aboard the firebreak. Reed and his skeleton crew worked feverishly to keep the damaged ship airborne. 2 minutes, the engineer shouted. Reed opened final comm channel. "This is Captain James Reed. All ships, the catalyst is active and stable. Prepare for detonation." He paused, then added, "It has been an honor to serve with all of you, humans and coalition alike. No matter what happens, remember that we united against extinction and we won." A minute before detonation, the impossible happened. The firebreak's emergency systems redirected enough power to the damaged engine for one last push. "We have thrust," Adams shouted. Attempting emergency ascent, the small ship shot upward, fighting Hyperion's gravity. With everything it had left behind, the catalyst reached critical temperature. The gas giant's hydrogen core ignited for an instant. A second sun shone in the coalition sky. The energy wave expanded outward at nearly the speed of light, vaporizing everything in its path. 90% of the swarm died in that single moment. From the command deck of his flagship, General Harris watched the readings with a mixture of awe and horror. The explosion was more powerful than his most optimistic projections. They had predicted a true stellar event visible across light years. "Any sign of survivors?" he asked, although he already knew the answer. "No, nothing could have escaped that explosion." "Negative, sir," his officer replied. The firebreak was within the critical radius. When the detonation occurred, Harris briefly closed his eyes. "Continue scanning and prepare for a full assessment of the remaining swarm presence." Ambassador L approached the general. His normally iridescent skin was now pale and opaque. His people knew they would not survive. They knew the odds. Harris replied. "They volunteered anyway." "Why?" asked the Elder Glint, his crystalline form pulsing with confusion. "Why risk everything for beings you hadn't met until weeks ago?" Harris looked at the fading glow where Hyperion had been. Because that's what humans do. We fight not only for ourselves, but for life itself. 3 days later, against all odds, a badly damaged escape pod was recovered by a Coalition patrol vessel. Inside, barely alive, were Captain Reed and Lieutenant Adams, the only survivors of the firebreak crew. "How?" asked Dr. Morgan, as she stood by Reed's medical bed. Were they well within the radius of the Reed, his face bandaged and his body broken, managed to smile. Weakly, "Adams, tell her." Adams, in a wheelchair at his side, shook his head. "The second engine wasn't completely dead. We got just enough thrust to get to the minimum safe distance. Then the blast wave hit us anyway. It disabled our systems, but did the pod structure hold?" Morgan asked softly. "They didn't make it," Reed replied. Looking up, their pods were too close when it happened. Dr. Morgan placed a hand on his shoulder. "They launched first. They gave them time to find that second engine thrust. They gave it their all," Reed corrected. Ambassador Lith entered the medbay, moving with the formal dignity of his office, despite the obvious emotional strain. "Captain Reed, Lieutenant Adams. The Coalition Council has been in session since the event. We've been re-evaluating many things." Reed tried to sit up but winced in pain. "The swarm is over." "Not completely," El admitted, but his weapon on Hyperion destroyed about 90% of its biomass. The remaining units are scattered, disorganized, no longer functioning as a coordinated entity. "We can take care of the rest," Adams said confidently. Lit's 4 hands performed a complex gesture of respect. "The Coalition has existed for 3,000 years. In peace, we believed violence had no place in a civilized society. But we were wrong. There are threats that cannot be reasoned with. Enemies who only understand force." He moved closer to Reed's bedside. "They have taught us this lesson at a terrible cost. We will not forget it." Meanwhile, the human fleet had begun systematically hunting the remaining fragments of the swarm without their central network. The creatures were still dangerous, but they no longer represented an existential threat. General Harris coordinated the cleanup operation from the Coalition homeworld, working directly with their leaders for the first time. "Their weapons," one of the council members asked during a meeting. "Could you teach us how to build them?" Harris looked surprised. "I thought your people abhorred violence." "That was true," the alien replied. "And in part, we still do. But we can't rely on the inhabitants of Death World. Every time a threat arises, we must learn to defend ourselves." Throughout Coalition space, perspectives were changing rapidly. Memorials were built to honor the humans who had died. Stories of their sacrifice spread from world to world. Dr. Morgan found herself overwhelmed by Coalition scientists eager to learn about human medicine, biology, and, yes, weapons technology. Her curiosity both worried and amused her. "Your physiology is fascinating," a biologist from the 6-Armed Coalition told her. "Evolving on such a hostile world, high gravity, extreme temperatures, thousands of pathogens and predators has created something extraordinary in you. Never before have you. We think of Earth as something particularly special," Morgan replied. "That's why you're special," the alien replied. "What would kill any of us for you is simply a Tuesday, a month after the Hyperion event." Reed was finally recovered enough to attend an official reception. The Great Hall of the Coalition Council was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all gathered to witness something unprecedented. Ambassador Lit addressed the representatives. "Gathered for 3,000 years, we believed violence had no place in a civilized society. The swarm taught us that survival sometimes requires strength we didn't possess." He turned to Captain Reed, who was now standing with the aid of a cane. "Humans showed us that courage means facing death, not only for oneself but also for others, even if they are different from oneself." Elder Glint stepped forward, his crystalline form glowing brightly. "Today we formally invite humanity to join the Galactic Coalition, not as members, but as protectors. a unique role for his species. Reed, accompanied by Dr. Morgan and other human representatives, bowed slightly. Earth accepts this honor. We hope to learn from your wisdom as you have learned from our strength. Across the room, the coalition species that once trembled at the mere thought of the inhabitants of the death world now looked at the humans with something new: respect, gratitude, and a touch of wonder. As the ceremony concluded, Red found himself alone with Leet in a quiet corner of the room. "There's something I've always wondered," Elle said quietly. "When they volunteered for the mission to Hyperion, did you really think you'd survive?" Elle considered the question. He didn't answer honestly. "None of us did, but that wasn't the point." "Then what was the point?" "Some things are worth dying for. Sometimes the only possible victory requires the ultimate sacrifice." Lit was silent for a long moment. "My species lives 3 times as long as yours, Captain Reed. We value our lives differently. That's why the concept of sacrificing centuries of existence was incomprehensible to us." "And now," Reed asked, "now we understand that the length of one's life matters less than what is done with it." The alien's iridescent skin shuddered with emotion. Its people have given more meaning to their brief lives than many of us achieve in centuries. She looked back toward the gathering where humans and aliens mingled together. "Perhaps that is the gift of the death world. When everything around you can kill you, you learn to make each day matter." On the observation deck of the terminus, Lieutenant Adams watched the coalition homeworld spinning below them. The ship had been repaired, its battle scars erased, but the crew would never forget what they had experienced. Dr. Morgan joined her, holding a data tablet. "The coalition scientists are making remarkable progress. They are adapting our defensive technologies to their own needs. Do you think they will be ready if something like the swarm returns?" she asked. "Adams, I think they will be different," he replied. "Morgan won't be like us. They'll never be inhabitants of a death world, but they won't be defenseless either." Adams nodded thoughtfully. "And what about us? What about humanity now? We're not explorers or diplomats. We're warriors who suddenly find ourselves without a war to fight." Morgan smiled. "I don't think that's entirely true. There's a whole galaxy out there, Lieutenant. And from what I'm hearing, the swarm wasn't the only threat lurking in the darkness." The communications system beeped. "Lieutenant Adams, on the bridge. Captain Reed requests your presence." When Adams arrived, Reed was studying a star chart alongside General Harris. "We've detected unusual activity in the Procyon sector," Harris explained. "It could be nothing, or it could be something worse than the swarm." "The coalition has requested our assistance," Red added. "Apparently, we're now the experts at handling the unknown." Adams couldn't help but smile. From feared inhabitants of the death world to protectors of the galaxy, what a rise, Mr. Reed. He nodded. His expression was serious, but with a glimmer of anticipation. "It seems the universe needs monsters after all, Lieutenant. Luckily for them, we're on their side." Throughout coalition space, memorials were erected to honor the thousands of humans who had died fighting the swarm on Earth. The news that humans were no longer alone in the universe and that they had already saved that universe from destruction changed society forever. 6 months after the Hyperion event, Captain Reed stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned coalition ship, the Harmony. Unlike its predecessor, this ship combined the elegant beauty of coalition design with the formidable defenses of human military technology. "It's beautiful," Ambassador Lit commented, joining Reed at the viewport. "The first of its kind, built by our craftsmen, armed with their weapons." Reed nodded. "A fitting symbol of our new relationship, more than a symbol," Elle replied. "The first step toward a future where we no longer fear the darkness between the stars below them." On the coalition homeworld, the first generation of their defense force trained under human instruction. They would never be warriors in the human sense, but they would no longer be defenseless. "Has Earth adapted to its new role?" Elle asked. Reed smiled slightly. "It's been interesting for centuries. We prepared for first contact, wondering if we would find friends or enemies. Instead, We found those who needed our protection. That has given humanity a purpose beyond our own squabbles. And you, Captain, have you adapted to being a hero? Hundreds of worlds are looked at his hand, still scarred by Hyperion. I only did what was necessary. We all did it on Earth. Dr. Morgan presented her final report on the swarm and its defeat to the United Nations. The remaining fragments of the swarm have been neutralized, she announced. But more importantly, we have established early warning systems throughout Coalition space. If something like the swarm appears again, we will detect it long before it becomes a threat. A delegate raised her hand. And what about the Coalition's request for our weapons technology? We are creating potential enemies for the future. Morgan shook her head. They are not like us. They do not want our weapons to conquer, but to defend themselves. Their entire civilization is built on cooperation, not competition. If anything, we could learn as much from them as they learned from us. Over the next few years, the remaining units of the swarm were married. The Coalition worlds began to establish their own defense forces, guided by human advisors, and somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, Coalition scientists placed a special beacon warning anyone who might listen of the deadly swarm and the even deadlier humans who stopped it. General Harris, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Coalition, watched as a class of young Coalition cadets completed their training under human instruction. Their movements lacked the natural aggression of human soldiers, but displayed a determination and purpose that hadn't existed before. "They will never be warriors," commented Lieutenant Adams, standing beside him. "Not like us." "They don't need to be," Harris replied. "They just need to be strong enough to deter the next threat, and if that fails, they have us, the inhabitants of the Death World, always available," Adams said with a small smile. In the years that followed, Indus and Indo, human ships ventured further into the galaxy, mapping uncharted regions and establishing outposts on the Coalition's borders. Earth's industrial capacity was geared toward building a fleet of defensive vessels, not for conquest, but for protection. On the anniversary of the Hyperion event, Reed returned to the memorial. Built on the Coalition's capital world, a crystalline monument captured the moment of Hyperion's transformation into eternal light, surrounded by the names of those who gave their lives. The Elder Glint, who once feared human violence above all else, joined him in contemplation. "We call them monsters," the crystal being finally said. "We feared their world and their ways. We were right to fear them, but we were wrong about why." Reed raised an eyebrow. "How is that?" "They are dangerous, yes, but not because they wish to harm, but because they will do whatever is necessary to protect life, even sacrifice themselves, as Reed used to say. In the years that followed, the universe called us monsters and feared our world. Then it needed monsters to fight for it and found friends instead. On a distant world at the edge of Coalition space, a human exploration team discovered ancient ruins covered in symbols that matched fragments of the swarm's genetic code. The galaxy held more mysteries and dangers than either humans or the Coalition had imagined. Together, the wisdom of peace and the strength of the Death World were ready to face whatever came.